You're listening to Dakota Spotlight. My name is James Wolner. In today's cold case snapshot, they said he wasn't stabbed. They said he wasn't strangled. They said he wasn't shot. So how did millionaire cattleman Joe Anderson, a man with money, with power, maybe with enemies, end up dead, stuffed in the trunk of his own car in the quiet heart of Jamestown, North Dakota?
The 33rd Annual Ducks Unlimited Banquet. Social hour begins at 5:30 p.m. and the prime rib dinner will be served at 7.
Hay Buster presents the latest in the Bale Buster line, designed to feed and bed today's bales. The 2660 and the 2660.
When your travels bring you to Jamestown, make sure you're staying at the Gladstone Inn and Suites Conference Center. We're centrally located, offering convenient access to all that Buffalo City has to offer. We also have
Let's rewind to Monday, September 16th, 1991. In movie theaters around the country, Terminator 2 is selling a lot of tickets. Magic Johnson is still playing for the Lakers. The Gulf War ended a few months back, and a lot of people are glued to their TV sets watching Clarence Thomas Supreme Court confirmation hearings. And Nirvana has just released a single that's about to dominate the airwaves. The song's called Smells Like Teen Spirit. But in Jamestown, North Dakota, a very different odor is about to make itself known. Something dark and mysterious is unfolding. And it all starts with a car parked at a hotel. The hotel is the Gladstone Inn. The car, a 1979 Buick Riviera convertible. And it's been sitting there, parked out front for a few days now. Hotel staff first took notice of the Buick on Saturday morning, but now it's Monday, and it still hasn't budged. Inside the Gladstone Inn, hotel staff are doing their afternoon thing. It's almost check-in time for the day's new guests. Someone finally says something like, "Anyone know whose car that is out front, the Buick?" Shoulders are shrugged. One of them, maybe the manager, maybe a desk clerk, maybe a maintenance man, walks outside to take a closer look. It's a fair afternoon, a little cloudy now and then. It might rain, it might not rain, who knows? It's always hard to see what's coming. A few minutes later, the phone rings at the Jamestown PD. It's the Gladstone Inn. They say, "Can you send over a cop or something? Something doesn't feel right over here in our parking lot. Something doesn't look right. Something doesn't smell right." The cops arrive and take a look. They run the license plates. The vehicle is registered to the Hay Buster Corporation, owned by a local businessman named Joe Anderson. The car is locked, but through the window, they see keys in the ignition. There also appears to be a pair of shoes in the car, but nothing else. But it isn't the shoes or the locked door or the keys in the ignition that is most concerning. No, it's a couple of other little details, and not so little. For one thing, there appears to be blood dripping from the back of the car. And in the air is a distinct and very foul odor. And so at around 3:30 p.m., officers and who knows, maybe a locksmith, huddle together around the trunk and pop the door open. There they stand looking down into the wide trunk. And staring back at them, wrapped in a green sheet, is one deceased male wearing nothing but white jockey underwear. At some point, a cop asks one of the hotel staff, "Does this sheet look like it's from the hotel?" A stunned and silent shake of a head is what follows. Then, "No, we don't have green sheets here." 2 days later, dental records confirm the body is that of 69-year-old Joseph Anderson. The state's attorney calls it homicide, and the case remains unsolved to this day. Now let's go back to September 12th, 4 days before the discovery, and to Joe Anderson's last hours of life. On this Thursday evening at the Jamestown Civic Center, a banquet is being held. It's being put on by Ducks Unlimited, often referred to as DU. What is Ducks Unlimited, and what's a DU banquet like? Well, I found the following 2 clips on YouTube.
DU got its start in 1937 during the Dust Bowl when North America's waterfowl populations had plunged to unprecedented lows. Determined to help, a small group of sportsmen joined together to form an organization that became known as Ducks Unlimited. DU members are united by a commitment to conserve and restore waterfowl habitat across North America. Each year, DU volunteers and staff hold more than 4,000 fundraising events across the country. The dollars raised at these events are the primary funds that drive our waterfowl habitat conservation programs.
One person planning to attend the banquet is Joseph Anderson. As he steers his Buick from his home right there in town towards his banquet destination, he has no idea the dinner he's about to have will be his last meal.
The 33rd Annual Ducks Unlimited Banquet. Social hour begins at 5:30 p.m. and the prime rib dinner will be served at 7 p.m. Get involved with games, prizes, as well as a silent auction. Help support our efforts to preserve and protect our wetlands and waterfowl.
Jamestown, North Dakota sits at the junction of Interstate 94 and U.S. Route 281. It's an ideal place to stop, stretch your legs, and fill your gas tank before heading west towards Bismarck, east to Fargo, or south to Aberdeen, South Dakota. And like many Midwestern towns, the interstate skirts the outer edge. Out by the interstate are the usual clusters, gas stations and chain hotels, the Baymont Inn, the Hampton, the Fairfield. There's a Walmart out there now, an Applebee's, a McDonald's. But the interstate won't take you into Jamestown proper. The original town center rests about a mile north of I-94. It's part of Jamestown most travelers never see. Downtown's main thoroughfare, what I suppose I would be inclined to call Main Street, is actually First Avenue, and it runs north and south past old brick buildings and glass storefronts. It's that classic part of a small city where you'll find the county courthouse, the post office, the public library, churches, a few steakhouses, and bars. And it's where Joe Anderson has pointed his car on this, the last night of his life, because the Civic Center is down here too, just 2 blocks east of First Avenue, between 3rd and 4th Avenues. Come along as Joe Anderson steers his Buick towards his last supper. First, we need to park the car, don't we? A small, boring detail, you might think. Come on, James, get on with the story, you may say. But hold those horses, we need to pay attention. This part matters more than you may think. At the corner of the main drag and 3rd Street, just 2 blocks from the Civic Center, sits a hotel, the Gladstone Inn. Yes, the same hotel where Joe's car will be found 4 days later, with Joe dead in the trunk. The hotel is a modest place by most standards, but in this story, it's either the key to everything or, like an innocent bystander, just a quiet witness to a life about to end.
Centrally located in Jamestown, North Dakota, Gladstone Inn and Suites is a getaway like no other. They have 100 rooms, 15 uniquely decorated suites, entertainment, all the comforts of home, and space for your next special event. So come, princesses and superheroes.
If you've ever been to a wedding reception, a family reunion, or a small town conference in the upper Midwest, you've probably been in a place like this hotel. Built in the 1970s, its banquet rooms are carpeted and loungy with drop ceilings and padded stackable chairs, ready to host a wedding dance one night and a farm bureau meeting the next. At the center of it all is a classic Midwestern hotel pool, indoors naturally, surrounded by 2 levels of rooms with balcony railings overlooking the water. Chlorine hangs faintly in the air, mingling with the hum of the soda machine and the soft echoes of kids cannonballing. There's a bar and a lounge, too, dimly lit, stocked with cold beer and full of quiet conversation. It's the kind of place where the bartenders might know your name or at least ask you where you're from. The whole place has a kind of unpretentious charm. It's practical, welcoming, and proud of it. A little faded in places, maybe, but still kicking. This place, the Gladstone Inn, sits 2 blocks west of Joe Anderson's destination, the Jamestown Civic Center. And between the 2 buildings lies the Civic Center's sprawling parking lot, 300 spaces across a full city block. But look here, what's Joe Anderson doing? He's not pulling into the Civic Center parking lot. No, he's turning into the Gladstone Inn parking lot instead. We don't know why he chose the hotel's parking lot instead of the Civic Center's. A simple explanation would be that the big lot was full when he arrived, or they were charging for parking, and Joe wanted to save a buck. But this story is in no way simple, of course, and as I said earlier, the Gladstone Inn is either a vital clue or just some inanimate aspect of an aging mystery. All we know is that he parked that night in the Gladstone Inn parking lot, and we know that not because it's where he was found murdered 4 days later, but because later that evening, when he ran into his half-brother at the Ducks Unlimited banquet, Joe told him that he parked over at the Gladstone. And this is an important piece of the puzzle, something you need to understand right now. The parking stall Joe chose before going into the banquet is not necessarily the same stall his car was in on Monday morning when he was found murdered. It might be, it might not be, like the chance of rain, we just don't know for sure, because it seems Joe left the banquet alive and well that night, and everything indicates that he made it home too. Somehow, it seems his car was returned to the Gladstone Inn parking lot with Joe dead in the trunk. In fact, remember the green sheet that Joe was found wrapped in? As it turned out, the sheet matched his own sheets at home. So here's what we know for sure. Joe told his brother he parked at the Gladstone that night. 4 days later, his car, with his body in the trunk, was found parked in that same lot. What we don't know, did the car ever leave that spot, or was it returned there with Joe already dead inside? But for now, let's stay focused on watching Joe arrive for the Ducks Unlimited banquet. We don't know the exact time he arrived. I also don't know the precise parking stall Joe chose. I wish I did, but those details remain locked inside a police file somewhere. I can tell you this, though. If Joe's intention was to park as close to the Civic Center as possible without using the big lot, the information reported a few days after Joe's death doesn't quite line up with that. The parking stalls at the Gladstone Inn closest to the Civic Center would be ones in back of the hotel, near the street 2nd Avenue, literally a hop, skip, and a jump from the big lot just across the narrow street. For a moment, let's assume this is Joe's goal, to get as close as possible, and that the Gladstone Inn itself is not a destination of his, just a means to an end. It's an assumption we'll momentarily make for the purposes of this scenario. We'll look at an alternative scenario in just a minute. Let's watch Joe Anderson now trying to get close to the Civic Center. He's steering his Buick off the main drag, heading east now on 3rd Street or 2nd Street. He passes 2nd Avenue and sees the big parking lot looks full, or too expensive, or maybe he doesn't want to deal with all the other cars leaving that lot at the same time later in the evening. So he whips his car around to the backside of the Gladstone Inn. There are stalls right up against the street, and when he kills his engine, he can look straight through his windshield and see the Civic Center entrance 156 yards away, 142 meters. He gets out of his car, locks the doors, crosses the narrow street, and walks through the big parking lot towards the entrance, walking into the final hours of his life. As I said, if proximity to the Civic Center entrance, while avoiding the big lot, was his goal, this would be the most practical place to park in the hotel parking lot. But if we are to believe the reporting done days later, this does not seem to be the way things went down. According to an article by the Bismarck Tribune printed 2 days after the body was found, Joe spoke with his half-brother at the banquet and told him he'd parked in front of the hotel. The same article states that when the cops made the gruesome discovery in the hotel parking lot on Monday, the car was parked in front of the hotel. Of course, there are likely any number of reasons why Joe might park in front of the hotel that night. Maybe he arrived early for the banquet and met someone for a drink at the Gladstone bar. In the few tight-lipped interviews law enforcement have done over the years, they have never indicated that Joe was inside the hotel before or after the banquet. They did share that they checked the hotel registration and found no friends or associates of Anderson staying at the hotel that night. The other thing to consider, and I know some of you are asking yourself this very question already, do we even know that Joe's car ever left the parking lot Thursday night? Because, although it feels much less likely, things could have gone down like this. Joe parks at the hotel. He meets someone at the banquet or after, perhaps for a drink. They leave in the other person's car for some reason and go home to Joe's place. Something happens there and Joe is killed, wrapped in a sheet from his bed, and then, the most unlikely and strange stage of this scenario, the body is, loaded into someone else's car, transported to the Gladstone Hotel parking lot, where the body is transferred to Joe's trunk. At the risk of being seen, I'm sure you're shaking your head too. What a risky operation this would be for a murderer, especially when you could just have left Joe's body at his house. Which, by the way, why didn't they? If Joe was murdered at his home, why load his body into his car or someone else's car and drive it to the Gladstone Inn? Well, maybe you, the murderer, need to get back there or near there to pick up your own car. Maybe you got a ride with Joe to his place. Maybe your car is at the Civic Center parking lot or parked in front or in the back of the Gladstone Inn, that place that either has everything or nothing to do with the murder of Joe Anderson. Now, let's explore the Ducks Unlimited banquet. Let's try to get inside and take a look around. It is said that Joe likes to have a good time. He doesn't mind enjoying himself now and then. Perhaps he's seated at a table reserved for prominent Ducks Unlimited donors. You see, Joe Anderson is a wealthy man, a generous contributor to several causes, so it's likely he's a strong supporter of Ducks Unlimited. He wasn't born into money, though. Joe Anderson is a self-made man. He was born on October 17, 1921. He grew up in the small town of Cleveland, North Dakota, about 20 miles from Jamestown. His family was profoundly affected by the Depression, and his father abandoned them when Joe was just 15 years old. Later, Joe joined the Air Force and was stationed in California during World War II. After the war, back in North Dakota, Joe Anderson and his brother pooled their money together to purchase 640 acres near the town of Woodworth. Joe eventually expanded to 5,000 acres. He married Hazel Goff, and they had one son together. They later divorced and then remarried, then separated again. One day in 1966, Joe is observing his own ranching operation, and he notices the need for a portable hay grinder. So he buys the rights to a large-scale grinder and modifies it for his own specific needs. He rents a small building in Jamestown and starts to manufacture these portable grinders. The grinders will help ranchers and farmers more easily get hay to their livestock. He names his new company Haybuster. Here is some present-day informational audio about the Hay Buster Company, still in operation today.
Round bales are a great convenience for your ranching operation. Unfortunately, feeding these bales can at times be difficult. Hay Buster presents the latest in the Bale Buster line, designed to feed and bed today's bales, the 2660 and the 2665. It'll save you time and money. Plus, it will increase your productivity and profitability. Cattlemen around the world have come to appreciate the quality and durability Hay Buster has built into the hay processing equipment. Let's take a closer look.
On this evening in 1991, as the 69-year-old bachelor Joe Anderson sits enjoying the Ducks Unlimited banquet, his company, Hay Buster, employs around 135 people and generates $20 million in annual sales. Not bad for a small-town guy who came up during the Depression. Joe likes fast cars, and it's said he owns a Jaguar, but he also drives a beat-up old Ford Bronco, and sometimes he shows up to business meetings covered in mud and manure. Friends say he's the kind of guy that would buy a $1,000 saddle for a $50 horse. Despite his wealth, though, Joe seems to have maintained his connection to his humble beginnings. In his office, he keeps a photograph of the little shack he grew up in during the Depression. He also gives back to the community. He's established a $250,000 scholarship fund. He donates money to the state hospital every Christmas, and he provides food baskets for the elderly poor. He's known as an independent, kind-hearted, but sometimes cantankerous businessman who freely speaks his mind while shunning the limelight. Now, for the most part, we have to use our imagination to picture Joe Anderson at this banquet, but there are some first-hand accounts out there. These come from interviews investigators did and then later spoke about at a press conference. You see, Joe's got a half-brother, a guy named Orr Tranmere. Orr is there at the banquet that night, too. Joe and Orr chit-chat a bit. As far as Orr can tell, Joe seems to be in good spirits, nothing out of the ordinary. Joe tells his brother Orr he's got a hot date the next night with a woman in Fargo. For some reason, he also tells his brother that he parked his car at the Gladstone Inn. The two brothers wrap up their conversation and then mingle about. At one point, Orr witnesses his brother Joe talking with one of his Hay Buster employees. All in all, a nice Thursday night in downtown Jamestown, North Dakota, at the annual Ducks Unlimited banquet. And according to statements made by police later, Joe left the banquet alone, and the preliminary autopsy showed that he died within hours of eating there. The preliminary autopsy could not determine the cause of death. And while law enforcement have been tight-lipped about this, news reporting at the time suggested there were no bullet holes, no stab wounds, and no signs of strangulation. Despite the uncertain cause of death, the Stutsman County State's Attorney did classify the manner of death as homicide. According to reporting done by the Jamestown Sun newspaper about 3 weeks after the murder, the North Dakota Bureau of Criminal Investigations reported that 7 to 10 agents and officers had been assigned to the investigation at various times. They'd interviewed about 25 people, and 8 of them were questioned a second time. Apparently, the scope of the investigation was large because Joe Anderson knew many people through his business dealings, his ranch operations, and his own personal social life. One article in the Jamestown Sun noted that Joe lived alone in his home in Jamestown and that he, quote, knew many women. Joe's younger brother Bob told a reporter that Joe had a lot of lady friends and went to singles dances 2 or 3 nights a week. 2.5 months after the murder, the state's attorney's office announced that any release of autopsy information could jeopardize the investigation. That same month, in November of 1991, The understandably frustrated Anderson family, having both the means and the motivation, hired a private investigator from Omaha, Nebraska. Apparently, the family really wanted to think outside the box, and they hired an investigator that would do that for them. The Anderson family gave Whelan access to Joe's home. His team discovered what appeared to be drag marks in Joe's garage, suggesting he had been killed at home and his body dragged across the garage floor to his car. Someone had apparently tried unsuccessfully to erase the drag marks. By January of 1992, Whelan was focusing his efforts on out-of-state business rivals, telling the Jamestown Sun newspaper Joe was looking at some opportunities outside of North Dakota, and that situation could have gotten him in trouble. They weren't the nice type of people who believe in fair competition. We've got a couple suspects we're looking into. Apparently, these business dealings occurred in the southeast United States. In January of 92, Joe's cattle operation was liquidated at auction. By April of 92, as is common in any kind of gruesome and unsolved case like this, multiple rumors were swirling about what could have happened about Joe Anderson. Was it a mafia hit? Was it drug-related? A jealous lover? Some kind of corporate intrigue? The Anderson family offered a $50,000 reward for information leading to an arrest and conviction. Steve Egelund, Haybuster's general manager, had his own theory. He believed the murder had to do with a woman, not Joe's estranged wife, but a girlfriend. According to Egelund, Joe had been seeing one woman for many years, and another man was jealous of Anderson's affections. Joe and this unnamed rival had had many disagreements before. By September 1992, 1 year after Joe's mysterious death, authorities said they did have some actual suspects, but they lacked enough evidence to file charges. A scathing editorial in the Forum newspaper criticized what they called stonewalling by the state's attorney's office, implying incompetence on the part of the investigating authorities and asking whether they had blown hot leads and were trying to cover their blunders. While the investigation was spinning its wheels, some complications arose surrounding Joe's estate. Remember, he was a man with a lot of wealth to leave behind. Turns out that there were 3 wills attributed to Joe, one from 1970, one from 77, and one from 1988. The 1970 will only left $20,000 to his wife. The later wills were much more generous to her, though, and in January of 1994, a judge ordered the use of the 1977 will, which allotted most of Joe's wealth to Hazel Ruth and their son, Jay. Interestingly, by October 4th, 1994, Hazel Anderson was indicted by a federal grand jury on income tax evasion charges. She had filed a fraudulent estate tax return in June of 1992, claiming Joe's estate was worth about $1.4 million, with estate taxes of $300,000. Actually, the federal government argued the estate was worth $5.3 million, with taxes of almost $2 million. In February of 95, Hazel pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 2 years probation and a $20,000 fine. The assistant U.S. attorney noted there was absolutely no suggestion she was involved in Joe's death. In July of 92, private investigator Dennis Whelan revealed that while the Hennepin County coroner couldn't determine the official cause of death in that autopsy, he had identified 2 possible causes. But Whelan wouldn't share them because he said it might jeopardize the investigation, a phrase that was becoming the unofficial motto of this case. One intriguing lead that may have been a possible cause involved a cattle gun that had belonged to Joe Anderson. Cattle guns are designed to render animals unconscious, either by simply stunning them or penetrating the skull and damaging the brain. Investigators were apparently also interested in the possible use of a veterinary tranquilizer called Rompin. Animal tranquilizers can be dangerous or fatal when ingested by humans. In one rare sign of progress in the case, 2 unnamed people were fingerprinted in April of 1993. From that point, movement on this case seemed to grind to a halt and go cold. In November 2005, the North Dakota Attorney General announced a new cold case crime unit, and the Joseph Anderson murder was one of 13 cases listed for review. Joe's brother, Bob Anderson, offered a $10,000 reward a few years later in 2009. Joe's brother Bob died in 2020. His obituary mentioned the business he had built with his brother Joe, noting that Joe had developed several pieces of equipment for feeding livestock in which he received numerous patents. The Anderson brothers had gone from Depression-era farm boys to successful inventors and manufacturers. After Joe's death, his son Jay Anderson took over the business, and he continues to run it today. Since 2006, the company has operated under the name Duratech. The company carries on with Joe's legacy of innovation in agricultural equipment while selling bale processors, rock pickers, seed drills, tub grinders, and more, all while the untimely death of their innovative founder remains shrouded in mystery. And back in Jamestown, the Gladstone Inn is still open for business, still has white sheets on the bed, not green ones. There are still drinks in the bar, chlorine in the pool, and a front desk that probably sees more than it says. And out in the parking lot, the pavement is cracked in places, but the stalls are still there, same as they were in 91. You might park out back, you might park out front. It might rain, it might not rain. In the old part of Jamestown, North Dakota, sometimes it's hard to say what might go down tomorrow or what happened a long, long time ago. If you have any information regarding the disappearance of Joseph Anderson, please contact the Jamestown Police Department. Thank you for listening to Dakota Spotlight. That's all from me for now, and I will see you next time.